So, we are here to talk about one of those lovely early holiday movies, a Christmas movie coming out in barely mid-December. We are talking, of course, about Fat Man,
Of
uh,
course.
Mel Gibson's return to the small screen. I don't know if this is getting a big release, like a big screen thing, or if it's just a Saban Films VOD deal. I can't remember.
I don't know.
Um, but I gotta say, I love this movie.
I loved it too. I mean, and I'm just like, I think I actually said that in my head while I was watching this. I gotta say, I love this movie, and I don't know if I'm proud of it or not, but um, I I'm glad it's out there.
Let's talk about the alleged anti-Semite in the room. Neither of us, but let's kick it
Thanks a
off with Mel
lot. No,
Gibson. Well,
yeah,
no, because
yeah.
here's the thing. While I'm watching it,
Uh,
I'm remembering why Mel Gibson was not only a star, but a hell of an actor in a lot of ways.
yeah.
And for the life of me, I know he's in movie jail, but I could not remember, aside from an incident where he called a cop sugar tits. And I know his dad was like into some weird religious stuff. And I don't know if he made some anti Semitic comments, but I just feel like it was so long ago that he was in the public eye and then kind of fell from grace that I feel like we should do a thing where we just check in on banned celebrities like, hey, Mel Gibson, are you are you okay? Do you still hold these weird views? Was there some kind of an out of context thing? Can you come back into the fold? Because watching Fat Man, I'm like, it's time to let Mel Gibson back in.
And he's been coming back in for a while on kind of, B movies and, kind of genre movies and, ensemble movies, some comedies here and there, mostly movies that didn't last long in the theater or only got VOD release. I agree with you. I've always liked Mel Gibson. I think he's a fantastic director. Um, yeah, I mean, it is a situation where a lot of his views and a lot of his, you know, verbal junk out there. I think just some, I don't know all the details. It's a lot of what you said, but a lot of it was, I think, in a kind of like a drunken, you know, verbal vomit type stuff that was caught. I think, there might have been, some. I think he was the person he was married to said some things about him as well. Look, I, I don't know. He's not my friend. I don't know this guy. All I know is uh, I know a lot of painters, from art history, that their lives weren't that very reputable, and I really enjoy
Oh,
their work.
sure.
And it's like musicians, actors. It's like I just know their work, and when it comes to, it's like Kevin Spacey. How long is he going to be in jail? I don't know.
You
I don't
mean
know
movie
what.
jail because he's not actually in jail yet.
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
No, but and
You know what I mean?
it's a
Like, what do we
dilemma.
do with
Yeah.
these people? What do we do with them? You know, the Mel Gibson is an interesting to see how he's kind of gradually come back, and it's kind of even more interesting. Like, I don't know if did you ever catch up with Dragged Across Concrete from 2018, a
No,
couple of years ago?
no, I
Good movie to
didn't.
catch up with. Kind of long, but well worth it. He plays kind of a reprehensible, kind of bigot, racist cop, and that's like, oh, that's why they cast him. Um, but he's really good at it, and so it's like, and I think in this last movie that he was in that went straight to VOD, Force of Nature, with his like hurricane in Puerto Rico, and he plays a former cop who's kind of racist and a bigot, I think. Um, Yikes. And I think he did a good job in 2012's Get the Gringo. After that, he did these B movie, kind of machete kills, Expendables 3,
My God,
Bloodfather.
I forgot about those.
He was the villain in Expendables 3's Stonebanks. Um,
Wasn't the
Great. He
villain in
did
the
it
Expendables 3 Jean-Claude Van Damme? Or was that two?
too. Yeah.
Two. Okay. Oh, that's right. Because
Three.
I liked two and I didn't care for
Yeah.
three. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he played, he was in another kind of genre pulpy B movie, Bloodfather, from 4 years ago, and then he did the Daddy's Home 2, Mark Wahlberg's dad.
That was like his return to the big screen,
right? Yeah, kind of
a
for a
thing.
hot second. Yeah, like a January or a December release. Yeah. So a lot of people are like, where's he been? He's been making these movies kind of on the, down and the down low. Yeah, exactly. I felt like this movie was like, wait, what? Where? I haven't heard anything about this. And then like, I think I didn't know about it until we got the email about it. And I was like, what? I have to see this. Because it's a Saban film, so that kind of triggers us a bit, us critics, because they could be pretty bad. But almost bad in like, I really need to watch this to see how bad it's going to be. Sometimes the Saban films aren't that bad.
Sure. I know that we've talked about, or I've seen one or two recently that are kind of, good or, really better than good, but the titles aren't coming off the top of the head, but it's kind of like the same problem with the Asylum films, where those have a reputation of being awful, but there is a handful of them. That's why I kind of stopped watching them, is because for a period, this is like, 8 years ago, I was going through watching the Asylum movies and they were trash, but then they started getting good. And I'm like, wait a second.
What's
No, this
happening
is not what I'm coming here for. But yeah, the same with Saban. I mean, the Fatman, I agree with you. I saw the email. I'm like, Fatman, Mel Gibson. I didn't even look at the synopsis until I think it was when I saw who directed it. It was Ian and Eshom Nelms that I recognized from Small Town Crime, a film that we talked about, a few years ago with John Hawkes, that was absolutely wonderful. I'm like, okay, I have to give this movie a chance just based on the name of the filmmakers, not even the star or anything. And what I came away from is one of those, I think this, if enough people see this, and apparently I think Ian tweeted or put on Facebook or something like, the Fatman trailer is the #1 viewed trailer on iTunes right now. So people are really interested in seeing this.
Catchy title.
I feel like this could be one of those offbeat Christmas movies like Die Hard or Gremlins. It's a holiday film, but it's like really kind of got a nasty thing going on. But it also has the Bad Santa, but it also has the feels like this is such a weird, wild movie that will have you laughing and cringing and also like welling up inside. And a lot of it has to do with Mel Gibson and Walton Goggins.
Yeah, and the writing. I think, watching the main, when you pointed out to me that it was directed by the Nelms, and I was like, oh man, so this has to be, there has to be something more here than just this weird title. I mean, look, the poster, I mean, there's a couple different posters, but the poster of like this kind of grimacing old man Mel Gibson with Walton Goggins in a white winter coat with a rifle in a small Walton Goggins in the foreground, and just this fat man. I'm like, what is happening? What are we doing here? It's like something we'd see in like the early to mid 90s or something. But it's just like, I'm watching this and I'm wondering, how did these guys approach Mel Gibson and say, we want you to be in our movie? Don't want to tell you the title yet, but you're going to play Santa Claus. Hold on. It's not a sweet comedy, where you're helping kids to, find themselves and find the joy in Christmas. You're kind of fed up with the way kids are right now, and you're kind of disillusioned of Santa Claus and maybe a little disgruntled. You're living, off the grid and, kind of somewhat North Pole, nondescript, and you got a loving wife, and you've been doing this for a while now, and you kind of lost your way. And by the way, it's called Fatman. Because Santa Claus, we didn't want to call it just Claus or Santa. I mean, that's been done. And I'm like, I'm wondering at what point Gibson's like, all right, I'm in.
Well, they're probably like, oh, we can pay you.
Yeah. There's that.
But no, it is great. And there's you kind of set up the initial premise of it, but the kind of like where Santa Claus is in this world. but the driving force is that there's this little asshole kid named Billy who's lives in this big house. His dad is never around. He's got all these like servants and stuff that he's nasty to. There is a grandmother figure, but she's just kind of off in her room.
Yeah,
And
sick. Yeah.
yeah, and he plots. He gets a lump of coal for Christmas, and then he decides to hire Walton Goggins, who plays for most of the movie. He's just referred to, well, at least in the credits, as Skinny Man. We find out his name at the very end of the film, but he's a hitman. So this little boy who's like 10 or 11 years old hires a hitman to assassinate Santa Claus because he's pissed that he got a lump of coal in his stocking. And there's so much plot going on and these threads that converge, I think, so perfectly into this inventive, bloody climax that it's not just that Santa's disillusioned, it's that he's disillusioned because there's like the kids have become, more cynical and bad. There's news stories about like kids dumping bowling balls over an overpass and like setting an uncle on fire or something like that, right? So he's like, what's the point? But because he can't pass out all these toys, he's giving out more coal than toys. The Christmas revenue is down, and the federal government that is subsidizing Santa Claus's enterprise, his like royalty check is half of what it should be, which is not enough to keep the operation going. So he might have to shut down the North Pole. It's this crazy thing. And he gets in bed with the government to manufacture like weapons of war.
Yeah, like control panels for fighter jets. It's like,
yes.
What? It's like, I like how like the writers know that what that is doesn't really matter. It's just that the military's involved, and that's what kind of matters. It's like, it's such a throwaway line. It's like, wait, back up. What?
But what I love is that it doesn't go to the obvious place where all of a sudden the elves become really militant and you see them with like rocket launchers and stuff. It's just kind of an excuse to get these two cultures, the military culture and the elf culture, together. There's some really funny and not touching, but just really interesting things to contemplate. Like the military, the one head guy is like watching the elves eat, and all they eat is candy and fudge and cakes. And the head elf breaks down like why that's actually good for them, and the inefficiency of the regular human diet. I love that it causes this complication. So when the hitman does finally make his way to the North Pole, he's got a lot more to contend with than just Santa Claus, who turns out to be a very formidable foe in the first place.
Right. He didn't plan on the military being there as a somewhat first line of defense. There's so many little kind of intricacies about this movie that make it so grounded in a real world, yet so bizarre. The young kid, was it Billy Winnan, played by Chance Hurstfield. He, when we first meet him, he's got kind of like he reminded me of Jason Schwartzman from Rushmore. He's got the kind of like the school jacket with the, the shields and the patches and stuff. And
it's like a private elementary school.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's like you said, he's kind of well off, and his father's always away in business, but he's like, writing checks, forging his grandmother's name. And I'm like, first of all, how does he have this hitman on speed dial? And it's like he wanted this. He's kind of like a science geek, and he's in this school project, and he always wins first place. And this year, this first place, went to one of his classmates, and he was so incensed and enraged that he hires the hitman to not necessarily take her out, but shake her up, shake down. I'm like, what?
Well, and what's interesting is this movie is so out there that it's still kind of not finding its footing, because the filmmakers obviously knew what they were making by the time it got to us. But we're still trying to figure out as the audience, how far is this movie going to go? What kind of a film is it going to be? So when Walton Goggins, who is terrifying but also very funny, when he shows up in the basement with that girl, and they're like, little Billy comes down the stairs, you're like, are they going to put a bullet in this girl's head? Are they going to electrocute her? Like, is this going to get really gruesome?
Yeah.
And I think from that scene on, it perfectly sets the tone for what the rest of the film is going to be. And what it is pretty terrific, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, surprisingly, uncannily, this is just a kind of a terrific movie, unexpectedly. To describe it to somebody and recommend it is maybe a little bit more of a chore, but that's okay, as long as they're willing to hear me talk about it. Yeah, and the little intricacies for these characters are really, really fun. Like when you mentioned that basement, before he goes down to the basement, he makes a sandwich for both him and the hitman, and Billy brings it down the stairs, like gives him half the sandwich, and then we see this poor girl in a chair, and it's just like they're eating the sandwich while threatening her and everything. And there's so many little, idiosyncrasies with Skinny Man, Walton Goggins' character. I mean, his place is very meticulous. He has his own beef with Santa, which is really interesting too, that Billy obviously knew about. He kind of collects things or toys. I don't know if he lists something on eBay or Craigslist saying, toys from Santa wanted, are you willing to discard your old Santa toys? And he basically is purchasing these old toys that from random strangers, but on, like, say, a baseball bat, there's a little plaque that says, made in Santa's workshop. And that's all because he wasn't satisfied with what Santa gave him one day. It wasn't coal, but it was something very minuscule, at least to him. And yeah, there's just this kind of bitterness and revenge fueled obsession that he has with collecting these things, but also the little idiosyncratic ways in which he goes about his life. I mean, he has a certain style, with clothes and sunglasses, and his car is just another extension of himself. And for some reason, he's a hamster guy and always has a hamster with him. And it's so funny because when he goes on this road trip to go and find Santa, I mean, one of his first stops once he's closer to the town in which he thinks Santa lives is this pet supply shop where he buys all these amenities for his hamster, and one of them's like this hamster wheel that he could put on the dashboard. And how do they think about all these things?
It's almost like I was trying to see what I was looking at, because it almost looked like they've got the cell phone holders or the air fresheners that clip into the vent. Like it looked like they had a hamster wheel that clips into the vent of your car just so you could do that effect.
It's so funny.
But yeah, I mean, him collecting that Santa memorabilia raises some great questions, because this is obviously a world in which people understand that Santa exists, because there is this little plaque on the bottom of certain toys, say made in Santa's workshop, as you mentioned. So I guess that means that adults accept the fact that there is a Santa who comes into their house and leaves presents. But I struggle with, and I'm not saying this is a criticism, it just makes me wonder, how can a world go wrong where you've got an actual Santa Claus going, like, bring joy to people? That's almost be an incentive to to listen to your better angels, kind of a thing, instead of it just being a myth.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think maybe somewhat of an answer is it could go wrong when the giver goes wrong. So, Santa Claus being the giver that he is, he becomes kind of disillusioned with the ways of the world, and especially the state of the children of the world, and how they're pretty much, disregarding kindness and disregarding any kind of goodness, and just being very selfish and self-centered and nasty and self-focused, all these things. It's hard to see that probably for him. And we never really see him, like, say, jovial or cheerful necessarily. We do see him getting better, like out of his funk, and that's really good because it gets us out of the viewers seeing, gets us out of seeing Mel Gibson playing a Santa character, because it's Mel Gibson kind of in a grumpy old man type of role, and he's played kind of grizzled and grumpy, especially, lately. And it was nice to see him kind of, stretch out of that a little bit. And as I was watching this, about midpoint, I was thinking, what is it that is kind of shaking him out of that? Did you gather what it was that it was kind of? It was. I don't know if it was like or the folders. Okay, so he's looking at the envelopes that he received were, I'm not sure where they were from, but they were pictures of children at a young age and how they wound up being at an adult age. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you gather where they were from, or?
Yeah. Mrs. Claus, which Marianne Jean-Baptiste.
Fantastic.
I feel like I should know where I've seen her from because
Watch Secrets and Lies. Seek that movie out. She's fantastic.
okay, I've never seen it. That's an older one, right?
At 1996.
Jeez, okay.
A Mike Lee film with Brenda Blethyn and Timothy Spall.
Okay.
Great.
But she, you know, one of the, I'm going to kind of sidetrack here, so don't let me forget about those folders.
Yeah.
One of the joys, I think, of watching this movie, and one of the reasons I started off by saying maybe we should reach out an olive branch to Mel Gibson, is there's a meta commentary here about like his professed or the racism that is ascribed to him about him being like such a horrible human being, that the Mrs. Claus in this film is a black woman.
Black British woman, yeah.
Yes, and they have such an affectionate relationship that you almost feel like if this guy was like in his heart, like he hated everybody, that you'd have to pay him like $100 million to like go on film and like be next to a person who's different from him. Never mind the fact that he spent decades like palling around with Danny Glover in the Lethal Weapon movies and all this other stuff. But it is just kind of a nice thing to see, like, oh yeah, he's, you know, that vile invective which you mentioned possibly rightly ascribed to drunken states, maybe not the real Mel Gibson speak. I'm not here to defend the guy, but I love their relationship in the film. I think she is the one who left those envelopes or folders for him in the stable or whatever, when he comes and finds them. And what they are, as you mentioned, pictures from like decades ago of little kids on Christmas getting, like, one got a little girl got a fire truck, and then there's a letter to Santa with a photograph of the adult woman as a firefighter.
That's right. Okay.
And then there's another kid who you see him is like a grown man, is like a chef, like winning some award or something. Right. And then you see him with the play kitchen he got for Christmas. And then it's also the key to, I think this might have been right before, or right after that scene, the military guy, it's that food scene they were talking about, like the diets of the elves. The army guy was talking about
need the 4 food groups, and you should have some fiber and protein instead of sugar and carbs.
Yes, but it's okay. Yeah, the elves say simple carbs and sugars, 20-minute naps every 8 hours, and that's how we live forever. Yeah. And then the military guy, so what about Kris Kringle, Santa Claus? And the elf says, it's the giving that keeps him young.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the key to what was in those envelopes. He finally realized that, yeah, I don't get to give out a whole lot of toys anymore, but I'm still getting letters from people who still believe, and they still ascribe a gift that I gave them 40 years ago to the reason that they're out there helping people and bringing joy to the world, as the song says.
Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah. It was nice and touching. And I think there's those little kind of human bits that, balance out the, insane violence in this movie. It almost gets cartoonish, the kind of almost Looney Tunes type, almost like a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner type of violence, cat and mouse game at the end. Yeah. But I think it's those human elements that really kind of ground the movie. Like you said early on about Gibson, I think maybe people forget that he's a really good actor, and he's really great at emoting, just this kind of pain and regret, and hurt. Go back to, Martin Riggs and Mad Max, and there's that kind of pathos there in the protagonist. A little bit here too. It's interesting that, we just watched, Let Him Go, which is a small town kind of setting and movie. And here we have this, he lives in North Peak, right? I think it's, North not North Pole, but North Peak. I don't know if it's how far away is it from Twin Peaks, but um, that would be great. David Lynch directing Mel Gibson. Anyway, but but you know, he's in this small town. Everybody knows him as Chris. He gets on the phone. Hey, it's Chris. You know, he's kind of got the gravelly. Hey, it's Chris, and people know him. He goes into a bar. Hey, Chris. You know, obviously his last name is Kringle, right? But it's just that they probably know, these people that live with him in the town. They probably know, but it's kind of like he's a celebrity in his own town, but they don't treat him any differently.
It's like Sinatra in Palm Springs.
Yeah,
Like he's hanging out there, but people are like, oh, it's Frank. Like he
yeah,
goes there to not be bothered.
yeah. Goes to the
Um,
deli to get a sandwich, and no big deal, you
right.
know. And this is kind of the same thing here, and it's kind of interesting to see that happen.
And what I love is that he's Santa Claus. So we don't get a whole like backstory of what his powers are, where he got them, and all
Yeah.
this other stuff. How many Santas were there, like, Doctor Who's or something? But there are these little inklings that, again, kind of make you wonder and imagine a story outside of the film where, like, he's in a bar with, I think the bartender's name is Sandra or something. And there's a guy that's macking on her, and she goes to get something from the back, and Chris kind of sidles up to him and starts talking about him, a very familiar way, because he's Santa. He knows everybody on Earth. He knows their naughty or nice things.
Hmm.
But just the way Gibson delivers it, it's not like he's pulling up like data sheets or something. It's almost
Yeah,
like, yeah, I know you. It's very
yeah.
conversational. You kind of wonder, what must that be like to be able to walk up to anybody and not have like a light bulb turn on, but almost like a familiarity that you can just start up a conversation, even if they don't know who the hell you are. You can talk to them like you've been, friends for years, because you kind of have.
It must also be hard too, because you know, part of you just wants to live your life and walk into a bar and have a beer, but then you know, you look to your left and you see Chad playing pool, and you know that he should be at work, and all this stuff. You know so much about him. It's like this Professor Xavier superpower where you could hear into people's thoughts, or you know their backstory, you know everything about them, and it's like so I get the remote location even more, just like to just be away. And yes, my heart is to give to people, but I don't know if it's almost like a burden to know so much about people.
I was going to say, it reminds me of a Superman, like the Fortress of Solitude out at the
Right,
top of the world.
right.
And that idea of Man of Steel, we were talking about Let Him Go.
Yeah,
Again, Clark Kent was a little kid and he suddenly hear everything.
yeah.
And he's like, the world's too big, Mom. And Diane
Make it
Lane says,
smaller.
make it small. Oh, God.
Yeah.
That's one of the few things I love about that movie.
See, yeah, she
Still
was
get
great in that.
chills.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that the location of where he's at with his wife Ruthie is fitting. It's understandable, but I think there's almost this. It's almost like, although he has loyal elves at his employment, and with this barn that has these sub levels, and um, he is, you know, he has people who are loyal to him. He has a loving wife, but there's almost this kind of like loneliness about him, and there's almost this kind of like, I have this responsibility, and I love giving, but it's hard to be giving to people who are ungrateful.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's really interesting that I can glean that from something like this, where it doesn't outright come out and say stuff like that. But I think it's kind of a testament to the writing and the performances that I can glean that from this.
Yeah, and there's a few different movies going on here, as we kind of discussed. There's the Santa with the existential crisis, there's the military component, and there's this hitman thing.
Hmm.
I don't think the military stuff stands up on its own
No.
as much, but it is a perfect like subplot. But honestly, I could have watched an entire dramedy about Santa's midlife crisis with his wife in that, that place, because they have such great chemistry together.
Yeah.
And the sort of the climactic or the pre-climactic scene where he's apologizing to Ruth for being so distant because he got really lost and she helped him find the way back.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great relationship moment, regardless of what genre it is.
Yeah. Regardless if it's about Santa, and
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because it's like, all right, we've seen Santa in different ways over the years in movies and stuff. You know, look differently in many different ways. The title, I don't know if Mel Gibson necessarily lives up to the title. I mean,
It's a stretch. I mean, he does have a little bit of a gut, but
he's got a
especially
punch.
yeah, but like later on in the film when he's lying in bed after he and Mrs. Claus have just, gotten
Yeah,
down, he's shirtless and you can still see he's got some definition there. Like
yeah.
he has not let himself go.
No, no, and even in other films that he's been in recently, I'm like, if you watch like I think Bloodfather, I'm like, man, this guy's in good shape. I would not want to mess with this guy. I'm sure he let himself go a little bit. It doesn't look like a prosthetic or whatever, but
And I'm glad they didn't go that route. I think they do a
yeah,
lot of it with clothing, kind of like the Kurt Cobain thing. He's in a lot of
sure,
like big jackets, kind of
yeah,
puffy sweaters and stuff. And he's got that big beard, so you don't know exactly how much of that might be double chin versus just like a
yeah.
forest of hair.
And it helps that this does not look anything like young Mel Gibson. And I know that that's because of time and life. But what's great about the way I've seen Gibson age is that he's got such a like craggy, distinctive face. I kind of love it. It's just, and if you look at the forehead markings, he's got like this X like right here that goes down. It's like these
That's
furrow brows and then these X's here, and I'm like, geez, this guy is like,
he got that when he was banned from Hollywood.
yeah, yeah. When he was probably when he was making Apocalypto, I don't know, but yeah, they branded him. Um, I don't know what kind of movies he's going to make in the future, but been really enjoying seeing what he's been making here and there. I've been meaning to catch up with that Force of Nature. I hear it's pretty terrible, but I don't care. And then he's got this new movie coming out, Boss Level, directed by Joe Carnahan with Frank Grillo and Michelle Yeoh. I
Jeez.
heard it looks awesome. Um, again, I I know that he's offended a lot of people in real life. It would be due to his real life, antics. I don't really care about the real life Mel Gibson. I like, his acting, and I like the films that he directs. We're all messed up and flawed. It's just that he has a platform, and sometimes that platform is live. and,
Yes.
he doesn't realize it. I'm not making up any excuses for his behavior. I think a lot of his behavior is reprehensible, but gosh, if people saw a lot of what I've said off camera and stuff and behaved, geez.
I can attest that you are on several
Right.
lists, I'm sure. No.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. But this definitely was a nice surprise. And these writers, these directors are really tapping into this kind of making films that you have this unexpected kind of developments that show up in these movies, and they are paying tribute to kind of like these certain genres, kind of B movie type genres, but they're definitely putting their own distinctive stamp, I think, on them.
Yeah, because I don't get. I did watch the trailer for Fat. No, I should say, and I think I messaged you about that when we were talking
Mhm.
about this
I think
movie.
I may have sent you the trailer, maybe. I don't know.
I think you had forwarded me the email or messaged
Yeah.
me about it, and I started watching the trailer. I messaged you back saying that I turned it off like halfway through, and
Because
not
you were
because I didn't
sold.
like, well, because I was sold, and also I thought I was in danger of seeing more of the movie, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to know anything more. But
Yeah.
I didn't get the feeling that, and this might be the reason it's so popular on iTunes, is it's being sold as this weird Mel Gibson as Santa shooting guns kind of a hitman thing but the sentimentality is going to be snuck. I think it's going to sneak up on people, and that's not a bad thing. But
No.
one thing I want to mention is
Yeah.
that Chance Hurstfield character,
Mm-hmm.
Hurstfield,
Huddersfield.
uh, his performance was so specific. I would be curious to see, not that, he's 10 years old. I don't think the Nelms has sat him down and had him watch American Psycho, but his performance is so much Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman, down to the structure of his face and the certain way that he pronounces things and uses his face. when he's kind of making these cold calculations about what his next moves are, that I was like, this is like prototype Patrick Bateman. This is wonderful.
I could see that, like a combination of Patrick Bateman and Max Fisher from Rushmore. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they just have, especially Max Fisher is like he has everything. The whole world should cater to him, right? That's like why aren't you on board with my greatness? It's very very interesting. I was curious. I'd be curious to see. I don't know. For some reason, watching him, I thought, what would have happened if this was a girl cast in this role? I don't know. Just a thought I had rather quick, but yeah, I think the performances here are surprisingly. I mean, Walton Goggins is pretty much always good. He's always just so on board, right? With he's always game for these kooky characters.
Yeah, and he usually plays kind of like these weird, unhinged kind of, he could play like a really great awkward killer.
Shifty.
Yeah, but there's a Netflix series that my wife, I don't know if she started watching it or if she's going to watch it, but it's called The Unicorn. And it stars Walton Goggins, and it's about, from what I understand, it's about a guy who's like a single dad who doesn't have any issues, and he's like, the best guy in the world, but he's having trouble finding like a partner. It's like, it seems like a romantic comedy kind of thing. I'm like, with Walton Goggins?
Yeah.
Really?
Wow. How soon does this go dark?
I was gonna say, like, he's not really a unicorn because he kills people in his basement.
Okay, that's the one on CBS All Access, I think. Yeah.
They're showing it on Netflix, I know.
Really?
Because we don't have CBS All Access.
Oh, okay. So it's on Netflix.
But yeah, but yeah, he's wonderful in the role. And we'll get kind of spoilery because I want to get your thoughts on this. But in the climax of the film, there's it does get really cartoonish when he's infiltrating the base camp and he's like taking out all the military guys. I don't doubt that could happen, but it does take on almost like a slasher movie kind of a feel. But when he has that ultimate fight with Santa Claus, God, that sounds so weird. But I like that it starts off as a really long distance shot that gets, closer and closer till they're both on either side of these like lumber stacks.
Yeah.
But at one point, Mel Gibson says, do you really think I got to be this guy by being jolly? You think you're the only person who's ever tried to come after me? And so, he's like, I think he said, like, what do you think I had to do to get to this point? Now, very soon after that, Walton Goggins gets the better of Kris Kringle. And then Mrs. Claus has some unfinished business with Walton Goggins. At that point, I almost wondered if there was going to be a twist where the Walton Goggins character, who's called Skinny Man versus the Fat Man, if he was going to somehow have to take on the mantle of Santa Claus, almost as like a curse where like now he's got to be the guy that figures out how to bring light to the world, almost like cosmic punishment. I'm kind of glad they didn't go there, but I love the fact that that seed was planted, that we don't get the full backstory. Like, oh my God, what was this guy involved in? But maybe that's how the mantle is passed on if you could kill Santa Claus, which I don't know if you can.
This movie kind of argues that, and it honestly, in that moment, I was like, oh, we're going here. There's a hint. You mentioned that scene where he's laying in a bed with his shirt off. I mean, you see a lot of scars on his torso from previous mishaps. There was one time earlier in the movie where he comes back from a night delivering gifts on Christmas Eve, and he's got pretty much kind of like a buckshot in his torso side, and he's like treating it with alcohol. So we get the idea that he's kind of a Wolverine type Santa Claus, I guess. But the magic is his healing factor. I don't know. But I ordinarily I would kind of scratch my head at that, but I was just kind of I just scratched my head. But I that was a legitimate scratch. But I kind of chalk that off to like, okay, I have to buy into some kind of Santa magic here, and even if it's subtle, I'm on board with that. Because of how grounded in real life as real life as you can get with something like this. How grounded in real life this is. A little bit of unexplained magic was no problem for me, I guess.
And it wasn't a problem for me either. It just really got me thinking about, did the Nelmses create a backstory for this character and how the world kind of works, and then just edit like a lot of stuff out to put in these little nuggets of mystery? Because at one point when he's talking to Ruth about, the operation possibly shutting down, I
Hmm.
think he says at one point, like, or she maybe says, what, are you going to give up the coat? So I'm like, okay, is the coat the uniform, the thing that grants the person the powers? and
Yeah.
and how does she figure into that? Because she, she's like, I think she said, we knew what we were getting into together, or
Hmm.
you knew what you were taking on, and kind of a thing. So
Yeah,
it just,
I'd be interested in talking to them to see what kind of backstory they had in mind, because there's so many interpretations of Santa Claus and the history of Santa Claus and everything, and they may not get too specific here, but they hint at enough of a lived-in past, and yeah, it's a mantle that they both accepted, like you mentioned. So who passed it on to them? Was it like like you're saying, like kind of like a Doctor Who thing, or Black Panther thing or something? It's very interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, just the fact that there's a movie out there called Fatman starring Mel Gibson. I should just, yeah, go see that movie.
well,
Um,
it's telling that when I described this movie to my wife, like I had that same, like, oh my God, this is crazy. I described it to him like, okay, it's about this kid who hires a hitman to go after Santa Claus. She's like, I don't ever want to watch that movie. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. But
yes, you
now,
do.
after having watched it, I feel like I might have to do some convincing here, because I feel like it's not going to be for everybody. And there is some
No,
rough stuff in it. But I feel like
yeah,
in its own weird way, it is so warm and hopeful, and really speaks to this place where we're at in the world. I mean, if you wanted to read some political allegories into it, this little kid at the very last scene of the film, he's like yelling at his Mexican maids. He's wearing like a dark blue suit with a bright red tie, and like,
mm.
just kind of like throwing a tantrum. And then at the end, they're kind of talking about like, yeah, this place is pretty wrecked, but we're going to rebuild it and it's going to be even better, kind of a deal.
Wow,
So you
yeah,
could definitely see that, but I love that it's not, you can interpret that, but it's not an over your head political allegory like
yeah,
Trump
yeah,
sucks,
or
kind of
Build
a
Back
thing.
Better.
Oh my God, yeah. Now you just froze my brain. Thanks. But I did like that there was a scene. It was just like a little cutaway from the radio, where I think maybe it was Mel Gibson listening to it, and there are these political pundits talking about like the president, the president said he was going to do that or something. Like, can he do that?
Yeah, can he do it? And then there
Yeah,
was even like a commentary and like, and we don't even, what Santa, does Santa really exist, kind of thing.
yeah.
I'm glad there was a lot less of that, because I didn't really need to be pulled into some type of meta commentary on how people view Santa, because I think, like you said early on, it's kind of subtly established that there's people that they, yeah, and for all we know, there's probably in this world that they created, uh, probably most of the people don't believe in Santa, but there are enough people where this actually, is a real thing for them, and obviously that's why we're following the titular character. Um,
That's also why I want to see the Nelmses take on the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy. Like, you could have an
mhm,
entire cinematic universe here,
mhm,
all with
mhm.
Mel Gibson. No, um,
Wow, that would be interesting. Did you ever see the Beaver?
many times. I've got two kids.
Okay. Oh.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't see it. Yes, I went
So
there.
it's a good thing that your wife doesn't, listen or see any of this stuff.
Or care. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, she
No.
don't care. We're in the same boat there. Um, yeah, that was. I guess I mentioned that because I feel like around the time that he was busy directing movies and stuff, and kind of getting praise for Passion of the Christ and all that, or criticism. Um, he made this. That was kind of a comeback film for him. It was like he made this weird movie. It was pretty much about mental illness in a way, but it's another side of Gibson that's just like this guy, he's just willing to take on these roles that are just, it's just, because you know, as much as you're saying that, you know, they threw money at him and everything for this, you know, and that's maybe true, but I think that he is kind of interested in like, okay, where can I go with this character? This is an interesting take on this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. What I was saying earlier was strictly a joke.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
get the
I know.
feeling. I feel like Mel Gibson is probably getting still like royalties from the Lethal Weapon movies, so he's probably
Yeah.
he's probably not
Yeah.
hurting at all. But like you're saying, he's not getting those A-list parts anymore for whatever
Yeah.
reason. So maybe he does have the flexibility, and maybe that's even by choice. Like if he's like, I'm gonna disengage because everybody over here hates me, I'm just gonna go do the
Yeah.
interesting things that I want to do.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm glad that's the path he's on because we're getting movies like this.
Yeah. I mean, I hope not to see a Fat Man 2. I just would
Yeah.
like to see this sit on its own and be its own thing. But I am very curious to see where these writer directors go next. I'm on board.
Well, if they do a sequel, they could. He gets a sidekick named Jake, and it'll be
Mm,
Jake and the Fat Man.
mm.
80s flashback, everybody. Sorry. On
Boy, oh
that
boy.
note,
Yes.
yeah, I'm old. Anyway, thank you for talking Fat Man with me. I did not introduce you, David Fowley of Keeping It Real at the top of the show. But yeah, this has been fun. It's a fun movie. I'm glad you turned me on to it, just like you turned me on to Let Him Go from last week. You're like my movie agent.
Well, I mean, I think it's crazy that here we are in 2020. It's a crazy year, but we're watching movies starring guys who were huge in the 80s and 90s when we were growing up. You know, Costner and Mel Gibson, and you know, next month Kurt Russell's going to be in a Santa Claus sequel, a Netflix movie, and it's like, so we have Mel Gibson playing Santa Claus this month, Kurt Russell returning as Santa Claus, and it's like, you know, we have these things to at least bring us some kind of craziness
And now I'm just
that
thinking
is
of
entertaining.
the thing of a crossover there.
Yeah. Oh, that would
Yeah.
be a very, very totally different tones there.
I didn't see the first Kurt Russell Santa Claus movie. Was
If
it
you're
any good?
If you're a Kurt Russell fan, it's worth checking out.
Okay.
It's pretty enjoyable.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So I think it's Christmas Chronicles, I think it's called, or something like that. Yeah.
Ooh, then you get Vin Diesel as Santa Claus. You have the Christmas Chronicles of Riddick. But no. All right. Well, I am going to let you go. Thank you again for hanging out and talking about this movie and the movie we talked about last week, because we did this back to back, spoiling the movie podcast magic.
It's just our outfits all the time.
Yeah. All right, man. Take it easy and Merry early Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy Fat Man.
All right, good. I'll let you go and I'll catch you later, man.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.